Hola a todos, el vídeo de hoy es un vídeo muy especial porque tenemos a un invitado más especial aún. Se trata del Premio Xataka Leyenda 2023. Matt Mullenweg comenzó hace 20 años el proceso de cambiar por completo cómo se creaba una página web. Hasta entonces, o bien sabías mucho de informática y podías crear una web, o bien pagabas para crear una web. Él creó Worpress, y puede que Worpress no os suene el nombre, pero os aseguro que lo habéis usado en alguna ocasión. El 43% de las páginas web de Internet hoy en día usan Worpress. Matt Mullenweg no solo es un gran defensor del open source, también ha hecho de la web un lugar mejor. Por todo ello es nuestro Premio Xataka Leyenda 2023. Matt, welcome. Thanks a lot for coming. It's an honor for us to have you here.
It's a pleasure, and I love being in Spain.
Oh, great. We are going to start talking a bit about Worpress, okay? It's been 20 years, and the Worpress DNA, the mission, the values, the commitment to the open source community hasn't changed. But the internet has a lot. Is it challenging to stay true to these ideas after all these years?
I think it's actually become easier and easier. So when we started, open source or even building businesses on top of open source wasn't as well understood. And a lot of people thought that the GPL, the license we're under, was incompatible with creating businesses. It also, at the time, open source was much more kind of back-end or server software. There wasn't as many examples of consumer software. And so both we've been able to demonstrate and also be part of an amazing cohort of other applications, including like Wikipedia, BitTorrent, Bitcoin, Firefox, Chrome. There's so much open source now. We're very lucky to be part of that.
And what things would you say have changed apart from that? I mean, in all these 20 years in WordPress, in the open source community?
The big ones are smartphones.
Of course.
Didn't really exist when we started. It was like Palm Pilots and Blackberries and things. And obviously that's been incredible. Broadband. So many people have, essentially infinite connections now and mobile connections. Over 1 billion people have come online, and there's billions more still coming online. And then finally, the browsers have become so much more rich that you can build like really rich applications with JavaScript, React. The majority of new code in WordPress now is JavaScript. Actually, the majority of code, I think, is now JavaScript more than PHP. So all of these make it possible for us to just create much richer experiences.
What has made WordPress different, unlike other competitors from that time that no longer exist?
A few things. One is our commitment to open source, including in the third-party ecosystem, so themes and plugins. We, both from a license point of view, they need to be open source, but it's also just a strong community spirit around that. Two, I would say that we've been very responsive. The way there's over 55,000 plugins and themes. And so that both allows each person to really customize WordPress. They can make it very unique to themselves. We've had this pairing of a nonprofit and a for-profit with the sort of open source side and the company I created, Automatic, which I think has created a positive flywheel between them. That's helped fund the community and everything. And then, finally, just staying responsive. We have so many contributors. 90% of the contributors are not employed by Automatic. So that helps keep the software very responsive to our community and our users.
An interesting point about contributors is that they are not only individuals. There are companies contributing to WordPress. Can you explain a little more about this?
Sure. So we have volunteers of all types. Some folks who translate, including, I think, hundreds that translate into Spanish, which is one of our most active languages, or I think maybe the most active after English. People who do documentation, supports, organize events, which we have a lot of great ones here in Spain, a lot of great WordCamps and meetups all over the country. And then, of course, the code itself, both the core code, what we call kind of the base that you download with WordPress, and then all the plugins and themes around it. Many folks are individual volunteers. I would say that's kind of the default in the majority. But we have this idea called 5 for the future. So for people who make money from WordPress, we say, hey, take 5% of what you make or your time or something like that and put it back into volunteering. And if we all do that, it'll allow the open source, the core, to be really strong and vibrant and competitive, you know, because we have a lot of great competition. There's lots of proprietary companies out there that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars per year to, you know, take people to the dark side, the proprietary side. So we need the open source to really have that same amount of investment. And so that's the idea of Five for the Future. And so a lot of companies participate, including companies that might compete with each other, like different media companies, or both Google and Meta, and you know, yeah, there's companies large and small that contribute.
That's great. You talked about WordPress.com, the commercial side. If we talk about WordPress.com, what is the typical user? Because my impression is that we've lost the personal blogs in the way in the last few years, and it's a pity. But maybe we have more business websites in WordPress.com. I don't know if that's. Can you share some numbers or stats?
About half of our signups are actually still people blogging. So although blogs are probably a smaller percentage of all things being published online because social media, another big change of the past 20 years. In absolute numbers, they're higher than they were 10 years ago. So it's, it's a very strong ecosystem still. As you told me, you yourself.
I've been a WordPress user.
I've been a blogger.
For
also, we find people returning. I found myself, as social media has, you know, some of it, particularly like Twitter X, is not what it used to be. People are looking for a space that is their own, they can customize it, and you can have more positive conversations and interactions. So, and you know, of course, with a blog, it's easy to also have a newsletter attached to that, or other forms of connecting with people that belong to you. They don't belong to the social network. So I have a lot of fun blogging. So that's about half of our users. WordPress.com started as kind of like a more basic version of WordPress. That didn't allow plugins or themes. But actually now, it's allows full SSH access, plugins, themes, customization, and integrates a lot of things to make it, by benchmarks, like the fastest WordPress hosting platform in the world. You know, when you think about it, we have economies of scale, where we buy thousands and thousands of servers. We have a global CDN, including data center setup here in Madrid. So things are very, very fast, particularly in Spain. And we get the fastest CPUs, the most memory. That we kind of are always upgrading because we run so many services, SaaS services as well. That combined with our knowledge of WordPress have allowed us to create what we believe to be the fastest and best developer platform.
Nice. Last year you mentioned that WordPress would reach 85% of all websites in a decade. How are you going to do that?
One at a time. It's really just, we build WordPress as a platform. So that means we need to do two things simultaneously. We need to make the software easier to use for the people writing, managing it, sort of the everyday non-technical users. And simultaneously, we want to make it a better developer platform. So people deploying sites for others or building more complex things have both the tools, sort of out of the box with themes and plugins, but also the environment where they can, using things like Gutenberg and block themes, can build sites that maybe used to take weeks, now in days or sometimes hours. So we find that those are very complementary, even though they're kind of different audiences. A lot of things we might build for one actually benefit the other.
Nice. It's a challenging, 80%, it's challenging.
Well, that's going to be a result of us doing the two things I mentioned. So the extent that we create a great product and are responsive to our customers and community, I think the market share will follow. But it's not a goal in and of itself. The goal is really like the customer centricity, being like listening to customers and building the best product for them.
Great. Let's talk a bit about Automatic, okay? Because you have nearly 2,000 employees right now, all with a mission: democratize publishing so that anyone with a story can tell it. Inside Automatic, which companies or products are the most significant in terms of revenue?
Sure. So we mentioned WordPress.com. We also run WooCommerce, which is an e-commerce plugin for WordPress that does over $30 billion of sales through it. We have an enterprise version of WordPress. So, if you are running a large site, perhaps like your own. You might use
not
WordPress
our own
VIP.
yet, but maybe in the future.
But we can scale it up to, I mean, we run a lot of sites like the Tech Crunches and others of the world, major media, but also things like the White House. So we can run it extremely securely as well from attacks, and you can imagine that's one of the most attacked sites on the internet. And we actually run the infrastructure for that. So those are kind of the big mature businesses. We have a few sort of apps as well. So Pocket Cast for podcasting. Try it out if you listen to podcast. Day One, which is, think of it like a private blog, fully encrypted local journaling, but like blogging. The Simple Note, which is a fun one. And then finally the acquisition we just announced a few weeks ago, which is a desktop-only app right now, but coming to mobile, which is called Text, TEXTS.com. So what this does is it brings all your messaging into one app. So WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, Messenger, Instagram, Twitter DMs, all this into one interface. So you can sort of see all your conversations, manage them, tag them, and get some cool features across all of them, like scheduled sending. So you can schedule messages across all these platforms, whether they natively support scheduling or not.
Oh, nice. I was going to tell you that in recent years you've acquired many companies, all the ones you've mentioned.
Yeah.
What does a company need to have for Automatic to consider buying it?
Yeah, I didn't mention Tumblr.
Yeah, I have that one.
Tumblr's another one. So I would say our profile for acquisitions now are great teams and businesses that are growing, but for whom being part of a larger entity might give them more access to, our other users. We can cross-promote things quite a bit, or resources to allow them to scale to the next level. So each of the companies I mentioned, including the latest text, didn't need to sell. But as part of Automatic, they can grow faster and in a better way than they could on their own. So that's the reason to join anything, really.
Which would you say was your most crucial acquisition after all this year? The one that you say, this was crucial for us?
WooCommerce, yeah. So that was, we acquired it in 2016. It was much, much smaller. It was, I think, 45 people. It's now over 400. And just the GMV, which is the amount of goods sold through it, was very, very different. So we've been able to really rewrite the plugin to be much more scalable. So now it can scale to millions of items. We just shipped high-performance order tables, which basically is a way to scale to tens of millions or hundreds of millions of orders. So, and it's built on WordPress. So you get all the benefits of the SEO and the management and the user system and the integrations that you get from WordPress. So that is, it's an open source Shopify. So e-commerce is obviously very competitive. You got Shopify, Amazon, Etsy, so many different things. But people are really adopting it, and we're excited to see where it goes. It is already grown to be our largest business, and I believe it will be actually larger than all of our other businesses combined within a few years.
Looking back now, what acquisition you regret not making?
Not making?
Not making, yeah, looking back. Maybe one you almost bought, but in the end you didn't, or one you say now, I wish I have.
There was a point I think we could have bought Reddit, but it was much smaller. It was before they turned everything around. They were still like part of Condé Nast and the Wired office, and those very early days. I think there was a point when Condé Nast was considering selling it, but I couldn't really convince my my board or team. It felt just a little too far afield of what we were doing, and perhaps if we had bought it, we would have messed it up. I think the Reddit story as a turnaround is pretty amazing. It's actually one that inspired us a lot with Tumblr, because it's unusual for things to kind of dip and then come back in such an amazing way. Yeah, that would probably be one I'm a big fan. I'm an early Reddit user. What would be some other things? Weebly ended up selling to Square, and we weren't part of that process, but I thought they built a really great really great product that I admired a lot. Yeah, those would be the ones that come to mind.
Well, that's really nice. I mean, we are big fans of Reddit too. We are big users, so.
Yeah. Mozilla would be cool. I don't think I'd do it today, but there was definitely points where I was like, oh, that could be pretty interesting to have a full browser, so we could kind of have an open web stack from end to end. We're doing a bit of that with Pocket Cast, and it's fun because most podcasts run on WordPress, and so being able to innovate on both the publisher side and the client, I think is really neat. So, but in the meantime, there's lots of great browsers, all the Chrome-based ones and everything are pretty good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Why haven't you tried to create the WordPress for newsletters?
Oh, yeah, we are.
Well,
so on WordPress.com, we have a whole newsletter flow now that you could do subscriptions and different forms of newsletters. It's built on our previous feature, which actually already has hundreds of millions of email subscribers. We have kind of a way that when you comment on a blog, you can also subscribe to it. And that's been a very, very popular feature. It drives a ton of page views. And then on the WooCommerce side, we do have some more commercial newsletter things like MailPoet. So, yeah.
But you don't think it may be needed a separate service for newsletter? Or you believe newsletters can grow inside WordPress as you are?
Yeah, I think actually the weakness of many newsletters is that they don't have a good website.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, you can.
and on things like Substack, the SEO is not very good. And so, yeah, the web traffic is really important, right? Because you get distribution from social media and everything else. So I think email is fine, but there's a whole generation of people for whom they don't even use email. So it really becomes about how are you distributing through messenger platforms. So for example, through Jetpack, you can auto-post to Telegram channels, which we're seeing a ton of usage from Telegram. We're actually looking into rolling that out to WhatsApp and other things as well. So I think it's just that, I mean, email is cool, but yeah, there's so much for distribution. I think you really want to publish once and distribute everywhere. And you want a home on the web with your own domain and permalinks that can be kind of where things go. And then, it's also great to have access to all the plugins of WordPress and the authoring tools and Gutenberg, tools for multiple editors. We're working on workflow a lot right now, so that you could write something, you could edit it, then you could send it to a copy editor, integrations with AI, which we're doing a lot of. So yeah, we could fork the software, but then you miss out on all those benefits. So we find it's a lot better to provide that integration.
We've been talking a lot about text, but not about video. What are your plans in video? Or are you planning on maybe buy something or create something? Or you don't believe on that kind of format?
We have a product called VideoPress, actually.
VideoPress.
So it already exists. So there's great video options to embed from places, like including YouTube, but they typically do a lot of tracking and might show ads or other things. So with VideoPress, we created something that is completely branded to your site. So particularly if you're doing a commercial site, it's nice to have your own video player, but it supports 4K, streaming, transcoding, has a really clean player. It's great on mobile, and it goes through our global CDN. Which has, 25, 30 points of presence all over the world. So it's really fast all over the world. So it costs money, but that's kind of our model. Like if you want to be monetized and your users' data to be sold and everything, go to YouTube. It's free. It's free, but you're paying for it with your data. For us, it's $50 or $100 per year, but then it all is kind of belongs to you.
And I imagine that in an internet so different from that internet of 20 years ago, there are certain red lines you refuse to cross. Like, no matter how much revenue they might generate, there are some things you are not going to do never?
Probably. I'm sure we could name some.
Oh, of course.
But we don't really think of the business in that way. We think much more on the positive side. And I think probably the most important thing that we try to do ourselves, and that I'm always encouraging other entrepreneurs, is to think long term. So Probably what we've run into is maybe things that could have generated revenue in the short term, but I feel like in the long term, they would have not been great businesses or maybe encouraged the wrong behavior in the WordPress ecosystem or something like that. So we always try to think not just what happens this year, but what might happen 3, 5, 10 years, even 100 years. We have a 100-year plan now down the road. And so maybe if we do something, what happens if everyone else does the same thing? Like, what does that encourage in the ecosystem? So that sort of long-term thinking, I feel, has kept us very, very aligned with our community and customers now over 20 years, and hopefully for many decades to come.
For 10 years, 100 years at least.
If we're lucky, yeah.
If you're lucky. Now let's talk a bit about work at Automatic, because you work remotely. You are more than or almost 2,000 employees, and you work remotely. And this is not a consequence from the pandemic. It has always been your philosophy.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on all those companies, both tech and no tech, that are now saying we need to return to the office?
Sure. So yeah, I have colleagues in 97 countries, including, I think we're coming up on 100 in Spain alone. And we're hiring in Spain, so please apply. It's a very important country to us. That came from first principles. So starting off, open source is generally people all over the world contributing and with a common passion. And what I saw through doing open source and starting in that myself is that it didn't matter where you went to school or what country you were in. All that mattered was your curiosity, your ambition, your drive. And with the democratization of information and learning things on the internet, like, you weren't gated anymore by where you went to school or where you happened to be born. So why limit that? The sort of core idea there was that talents and intelligence is equally distributed all over the world, but opportunity was not. And so could we create an opportunity to bring the best people from all over the world, get them working on the same thing? That's gone really well for us. So where a lot of my friends building companies just in the Bay Area were having trouble hiring, we never have. You know, we have sometimes hundreds or thousands of applications for every role that we hire for. So that's why we did it. You mentioned some companies asking people to go back to the office. I understand, because working remotely is kind of a different skill than working in the office. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily better or worse. I prefer it from, so like I said, access to talent all over the world, but it has trade-offs. You know, you probably need to put more work into communication. We spend a lot of time and money on meetups. I'm actually on my way to one in Munich right now with over 300 people. So it means you might travel more than if you were in an office every day. So those are a series of trade-offs. Some, I think, make things better. Some might make things harder. But you just have to be conscious of those trade-offs. I would liken it a little bit to like learning to play a different instrument. Like if you play, you know, the saxophone, maybe it's learning to play the piano or the flute. Very possible. A lot translates and is the same in both, but it is a different skill. And particularly for managers, they might need to learn to manage in a different way than they did when they were all in the office every day. The only thing that I think companies need to be careful of is hypocrisy. So sometimes I see, you know, remote work for me but not for thee, or this idea where the bosses of the company are often remote. Or, you know,
that's not fair.
But they're asking their colleagues, their employees, to be in an office every day. And I don't think people are going to like that. So just pick one way or another. If you want to be in an office, that's fine, that's great. If you want to be in the office a couple days, be consistent with that and do it yourself as well if you're the leader. And if you're going to be remote, stick to that. Don't sort of tell people they'll do that and then change it down the line. Really commit to it and get good at it. And just like you had to learn to manage or lead in an office when you first started off in your career, it might take you, 6 months or 12 months to be good at it. But I think it's very possible and anyone can learn it. And we try to share what we've learned in this. I have a podcast actually on this, distributed.blog. And there's also tons of other great companies, including many at the billions and billions of dollars and thousands of people, like GitLab actually, that share their whole handbook and playbook Basecamp's another great company that has written a lot of great books around this. There's a new one from Tamara Sanderson, who actually used to work at Automatic. So there's lots of great resources now to learn how to do this well.
You don't use emails much.
No.
You have a few meetings only. What's the secret there? Because we want to know. We need to know.
Well, I think one unlock when you get really good at being distributed and remote can be if you can get good at asynchronous work, because that allows people to participate at any time during the day versus trying to get everyone online at the same time. That is another skill, and I would say it's like a higher level. it's a bit harder than even being remote. But we found that there's the technology for asynchronous work. Email's not great for it, right? Because email is limited in what you can embed in the emails. It's often a polluted space where you're getting things from your colleagues, but also from external and spam and other things. Threading can work differently. And then finally, so much information is locked up in the inbox. So if someone new joins a team, how do they find all the history of those emails? You could use mailing lists, and some companies do that a lot, like Google and Stripe, but we found actually an internal form of blogging was the best thing for us. So we actually created a product called P2 that you can buy and other companies can use. It's also open source, but this is really our secret for running the company. It's kind of our secret weapon. And people do thousands of P2 posts and comments per day. And so it provides now kind of like a 15-year history of everything we've done as a company, every decision we've made, every meeting we do, all of that goes on the P2, which then creates this incredible knowledge base that's all searchable and indexed. And now it's going to be able to be read by AI. And so you'll be able to talk to it and ask questions. So every single post, it actually kind of goes to making the company more intelligent. We have like this organizational blockchain of every decision we've ever made. So I think that, it's a learning curve to do that in the beginning, but it's actually an incredible investment. And I think probably every company should be doing something like this. Regardless of whether you're in the office or not. I'd say even if you're in an office, all those problems I talked about new people joining, knowledge being locked up, history of decisions, so important to have.
And now talking a bit about talent. In global companies, especially in the tech industry, there is always a debate. Localized salaries, adapted to each worker country,
Sure.
or global salaries. You opt for global salaries.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, we started off just like every other company with sort of paying different in different countries. But fundamentally, I would say the principle there, which, by the way, is a relatively new principle in the last 50 or 60 years, is, equal pay for equal work. People used to pay men and women differently and thought that was okay. Now, of course, we know it's morally odious. It's horrible. So why would you do that? I wouldn't pay people differently because their skin color is different. So why would you pay them differently if they're in a different country? Assuming they're able to do the same work. Maybe if we were Starbucks and everything had to be happening in the office, like it would make sense to have localized pay. But we're not, we're online. And so people are able to contribute equally regardless of where they are in the world. And in fact, it matters very little to me. So if we had a job that was local, maybe an office manager or like a salesperson that need to be in like Washington, D.C. to do government, perhaps there'd be some local adjustment. But for 99.9% of our roles, we're totally agnostic to where they are. And so, we're now pay at the same rates. This puts us also way above local norms in some countries, which then encourages the best people to work at us. We did this from sort of a principle point of view, but I actually think it's not just altruistic, it's actually the selfish thing to do for companies over the long term. Again, short term versus long term. Because if you are, Google or Meta and you're paying your people in a certain country less, they're going to come work for companies like us or GitLab that are going to pay them more, So again, it's just for keeping your best talent. I think we're going to move to global salaries across the board. So I believe it's the future.
Oh, nice. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence because I saw an interview of you that you recently mentioned that AI is going to bring more disparity in societies, businesses. Tell us more about this.
Oh, I don't remember saying that.
No? Really? It was an interview about AI like a few months ago in video on YouTube. I don't remember the channel, but...
I do think that incredible economic benefit is going to go to the frontier AI companies, you know, the Googles, Meta, and OpenAI / Microsoft, are going to become even more valuable than they are today, which is hard to imagine because they're already trillion-dollar companies. I also think, though, that all the companies building on top of AI, you know, which is going to be everyone, is going to integrate it, will also see a huge boost. Every job that can be enhanced from AI, people will become so much more productive, which will also mean they'll be able to generate more economic value per person and make more money. And then at the very low end, then access to these tools, you know, access to basically intelligence across the board is going to transform society. And when you think of its impact on education, any person, regardless of their economic ability, can essentially have a free tutor that's, you know, a smart grad student now and going to be very, very smart in the future. Imagine what that could do for education and everything like that. So I'm just really excited to see what happens, particularly over the next, say, 10 to 15 years, is because we're hitting inflection points. You know, NVIDIA just announced new chips that are basically double the speed coming out soon. And so, you know, what we think is amazing now, I think actually could 10x in the next 12 to 18 months. And we haven't seen a pace of change in technology like this really ever in human history. So I'm very, very excited. Technology, actually, when you think about it, you know, the iPhone you or I have is the same that, you know, Bill Gates has, or Tim Cook, or the richest people in the world. And so that idea that technology is really equally accessible, so the richest people and, you know, people at the entry level is, I think, a huge democratizing force and kind of amazing. You would rather be a poor person today than a king 100 years ago or 200 years ago, right? When you think of access to medicine, antibiotics, the internet, technology, all of these things, it's the best time ever to be living.
And a more practical and personal question, how do you use AI in your day-to-day?
Oh, I'm trying to use it as much as possible. So I actually use it as a personalized tutor. I love to learn. I also dropped out of college.
What are you learning?
Oh, physics. I love physics. I ask a lot of science questions, like, how is hail formed?
Wow.
You know, it's ice, it's heavier than air. How does that work? I never knew. And you can ask it a question and then ask it more questions. You know, I find often it's kind of like a rabbit hole, much like I would use Wikipedia, but kind of more personalized and tailored. Using it for coding is actually pretty amazing. And being able to feed it now images, data, spreadsheets, code, and have it, you know, look for bugs, have it modify it, have it translated into a different language. It's kind of incredible. Now you have to, when you first start doing this, depending on how you ask it the question, you'll hit a lot of dead ends. So prompt engineering, or learning how to speak to it and how to sort of chunk the questions to be kind of smaller, is really key for getting it to do what you want. But then once you do, it's actually probably the most important skill people could learn today. Because when you think about it, anyone now can create applications, can write code, can like do lots of things that, you know, I spent years and years learning how to do. It now does in minutes.
It's amazing, yeah. Now I have a block of questions about your personal life.
Sure.
Okay? How is a typical day in the life of Matt Mullenweg?
Oh, you know, probably less exciting than most people would
Really?
think. I'm really on my computer a lot.
Yeah.
And you see me in the airplane, I'm on my laptop. I like it's kind of my happy place in a lot of ways. Maybe that's why I built a company where you can be on your computer all the time. But I love to read. So that's probably another big activity I do, both internally. You know, I'm reading a lot of papers around AI, a lot of our internal P2s that I mentioned, or our internal blogs, a lot of sort of keeping up with the community. So, there's so many podcasts and blogs about WordPress. I try to keep up with those. I read Twitter when people talk about our products as a way to kind of stay connected to everything. And then occasionally, travel and going to these meetups. Maybe that's WordPress events or WordCamps. Maybe it's an event like tonight, with this award. Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here.
It's a
pleasure. Occasionally for fun.
And do you still code?
I do, yeah.
Ah, nice. After all these years, you might be busy for lots of things in your companies, but you still try to do some coding.
Yeah, it's kind of my way to relax, actually. So I'm not really writing code for core WordPress anymore. Sometimes, it's been a little while, but I have historically written a lot of our internal tools at Automatic, particularly the early versions of some like stat stuff or search or a lot of our HR stuff, although now there's other people doing all that. I just have a lot of weird personal projects, like I have code that filters all my email and it sort of scans things and like has sort of its own kind of address book that puts different people into different places. And so, just something I needed myself, personal productivity tools, kind of local ways to track like documents and to-dos. And it's what a lot of coders do. You end up kind of making tools for yourself.
And you still blog a lot, I must say.
Oh, way less than I used to. I used to post hundreds of times per year. It dipped down to, because a lot of my writing was going internally, so more, I feel like you're a writer. I only have so many words in me per day, call it 1,000 good words or 2,000 good words. And so a lot of that started to go internal. And so I have tried to because I read a lot as well, to just sort of remind myself, make that mental habit loop of, I should publish this, or I should just do a link to this. And so actually just personally, I've modified my theme, so I don't need to have a title on everything anymore. I can just do like little one-liners, or what I call asides, closer to like a tweet length or like a Tumblr. I have a lot of fun on Tumblr as well, just posting like cool art I find or reblogging things. And then for my blog, I write about WordPress and sometimes do longer essays or announcements, like when we acquire something. But a lot of it for me just has been the fun of like linking things I'm reading or what books I'm checking out or TV shows.
And at Xataka, we are a technology publication. We write about mobile phones, computers, and everything. So I have to ask you this. What mobile phone do you use?
Oh, I actually have two right now. So I've got the iPhone 15 Pro, and I always get the latest iPhone. I've actually been using an Apple Watch Ultra as well, which has been pretty fun. I tweak it a lot though to like really turn off notifications, and actually on my iPhone I removed Twitter. So it's really more of I try to have it be a productivity device. I also have the Pixel Fold. So I always try to do an iPhone and an Android. Because we have lots of users on both, and I want to test applications, both our own and others, on both. And for me, that's a bit more of a consumption device. So a lot of times I'll watch YouTube on there. I can open it up. I actually like reading books on it, although my favorite device is a Kindle there, because it's distraction-free. And that was probably half my flight here was reading on the Kindle. And then I still have like Twitter and stuff on there. So the Pixel tends to be a little bit more of my distraction or entertainment device.
What do you think about foldable phones? Do you think they are going to be mainstream in the future?
It's interesting. I mean, it is kind of chunky, but I really love the screen. The fold thing feels very high tech. It's not that much heavier. It's a little bulkier in my pocket. I do use it a lot just as a phone though, so unless I'm watching a video, I'm typically not using the fold function as much as I thought. So I might go back to just a regular, Pixel 8 or nothing phone or something. It is kind of nice to be able to like set it on a table. And so I find that's kind of neat. Like maybe I'm eating and I'll put a video, just kind of like, kind of do this mode. Occasionally I'll do this where it's like tall, but then you get the crease in the middle, which is kind of weird. So Yeah, again, I like trying out technology. So I'm kind of a gadget fiend. I'm always like experimenting with new gadgets or trying out new things. I just got a CO2 monitor, I think at ARANET 4, ARANET. It's just a little monitor. It tells you kind of the ppm in a room or a place, because actually your brain functions better at lower CO2 levels. So if you're in a place that's like 1200, it actually reduces your brain capacity by like 15%. And if it's way high, it goes down by like 50%. So that's just been kind of interesting to me. I love fitness trackers. I've experimented with a lot of those, like the Whoop, the Oura Ring. What other gadgets? Just a lot of home stuff too. Like I'm a photographer, so always playing with cameras. Actually, probably my favorite thing about the Pixel Fold is the 5x zoom on it, and the camera functionality is really, really quite good. And I didn't go for the giant iPhone to get the bigger zoom. It just was a little too big for me, so I have the normal size. A Flipper Zero is really fun. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah. We've written a lot about the Flipper Zero, colleagues here.
Yeah, it's, I love hacking on things and playing with things, and so.
What cool things are you doing with the Flipper Zero?
Well, one, I just had so many fobs, for different offices or apartments or homes or different things, and so being able to put that all into one was like really nice. Sometimes you can use it at hotels too, so just like simplifying what I had to carry around, reduced it quite a bit. The infrared thing is fun sometimes. I don't use that as much, but even like at home if I can't find the remote, but maybe I have the flipper in my pockets.
You carry it around everywhere, right? The Flipper Zero?
Sometimes, not always, but it's always in my backpack, and then sometimes depending on where I am, it might be in my pocket all the time. So
And,
just stuff like that is always fun to play around with.
I was going to ask you about your setup for remote work. What tools do you recommend for? Because I've seen some reviews in your blog. I think you reviewed a mic that didn't work pretty well. I think it was a microphone or some
headsets and different things.
The headset, I think.
Particularly a few years ago, I think the headsets were really important, and to get that good audio quality and the background noise reduction. So I've tested out all of them, and it really annoyed me when the ones that were more expensive, hundreds of dollars, were worse than the one I would typically recommend, which was this $40 Sennheiser that was USB, and it sounded the best. Nowadays, the noise cancellation has gotten so good, and so built into the MacBook Pro is actually a really high-quality mic array. And now built into macOS, I used to use Crisp.ai, which was a cool background noise reducer. But now actually the built-in voice isolation mode on both the iPhone and the MacBook built into macOS is really quite good. And so I find by default, I just try to be, I'm often in a room, so I just use the built-in speaker and mic now, where before I would often use that. And I use it for podcasts, recording things, everything. And it's a very high quality. And you just get kind of a, when you have a condenser mic or a shotgun mic or other things I've used, like very fancy setups, it's very sensitive to the room and the echo and other things. So having that little bit of processing, both what's built into Zoom and stuff now, but also this built-in OS features, creates a really, really high quality. And then if I'm out and about, just the AirPods are also really quite good now. So just they've come so far. I love that they're also USB-C. That's my favorite thing about the new phone and the AirPods is just finally getting rid of all these lightning cables. It's
I think we are all the same. We love that.
My last thing is, I love audio. Of course, I'm a musician, and so I often travel actually with my favorite Bluetooth speakers are the Mega Booms. So the Ultimate Ears. I think it's the Mega Boom 3. It's kind of like. They have smaller ones, but I actually sometimes travel with the bigger one, and then you can set up 2 of them and get stereo, and so that's really great. But that still uses micro USB. They haven't updated it in years, and so actually, I've been testing out some other things. Like the Sonos has a really good portable speaker, and but I haven't found something that does the stereo. And the waterproofness and kind of ruggedness of those Mega Booms. But I'm in the market. If you have recommendations, I know y'all know gadgets and stuff, things that particularly do stereo and have that long battery life. The other gadget I'll travel around with a lot is, the name's escaping me, but it's a RGB light. So it's actually meant for photographers. So it's a USB-C powered light that can do like 8 or 9 hours of light. And it has kind of a built-in little stand thing, so you can prop it up, or it has a mount, so you can mount it to things using like a Gorilla Pod or something else. And so that's nice for, because lighting matters so much. So if I'm traveling and broadcasting something, which I do monthly to the whole company or podcast or interviews, the light helps a lot. So usually a lamp and one of these. And then just when I'm chilling, it has a mode that kind of goes through like an RGB, so like the rainbow colors. And so, setting up 1 or 2 of those in a room, it really creates a nice vibe. So that plus the music, is much, much nicer than often the typical lighting in a conference room or hotel room or something like that. So I'm very sensitive to lighting and music and sound. So I found that's just a nice setup. One thing that, actually, if I weren't here, I would have 2 new pieces of technology that I'm very excited about. One is the new MacBook, and I've been doing a lot of experimentation with running models locally, like the Llama or the other open source things. And so I actually splurged on the one with 128 gigabytes of memory and the M3 Max. So I'm excited for that, both for all my open tabs, which sometimes go north of 500, but then also like playing around with some of these local models and doing some things locally. The new Whisper stuff and transcription is really amazing. And then 2 is the new Opal Tadpole camera. I don't know if you've seen that, but it was just announced, I think, in the last day or 2. Automatic's actually an investor in that company. And I loved the first version, but it was bulkier and bigger. So I traveled with it for a little bit, but it was a little tricky. And this new one is really designed to travel with and go on a laptop. And so I'm excited about that. I do use the continuity camera where you sort of mount, and I have a little MagSafe mount for my laptop. And so that's been some of my go-to for higher quality video on the road. But it's not always stable. Sometimes, at the last minute it won't connect or something like that. So I'm looking very much forward to the Tadpole where you just plug it in and it works.
You're a big tech lover. I mean, you really love gadgets as much as us. I mean, I'm really glad to have this interview because I feel like I'm interviewing one of us,
Yeah, I do typically annually, and coming up in the next few days, what's in my bag post.
I know, I've seen it.
And so that's always exciting because I really, as I've become more successful, I find the thing that I just get the most joy from, like the thing I would love to have done as a kid, but I couldn't afford, but now I can easily afford, is just gadgets. And so, I get the new iPhone or the new laptop every year. Those are kind of the big expensive things, but a lot of this stuff is not expensive. But what I'll do is, not unlike y'all, I'll get a bunch of these and then I'll test them out on my own. I'll record audio, or sometimes like some of the things I'm interested in aren't well reviewed. So a lot of people, when they review headphones or noise canceling headsets or microphones, would review like some of the functionality or how it sounds, but not how it records. And there's so much variation in the codecs that are used, sort of how it interacts, particularly the Bluetooth stuff. Like sometimes when you go into speaking as well as listening, they'll degrade the codec to be lower bandwidth and sound tinny or noise cancellation, background noise, all that sort of stuff. I was just finding wasn't well served. Hopefully y'all can start to do that more for the Spanish community. In English we've got Wirecutter was good for a while, but is not as good now. I'm trying to think. There's some other sites that do some good evaluations.
Ratings, I like ratings. Artists.
Oh yeah,
artists.
that one does some really cool.
I like that one.
Like technical evaluations, and they have like a cool lab. But what I love, kind of at the end is I want someone to just tell me what it is, and I like when it's a real journalistic site, so that they have that independence. They're not doing it just for like an affiliate link or something, or sometimes like a blogger or another enthusiast, because then they're just doing it for passion, not like for any other reason.
We try to do that for the Spanish community. We do lots of reviews and everything, and we try lots of things. So
well, I believe it's why you're the preeminent site, and why I was so excited to visit and get to know y'all, because I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately, but I've heard so many amazing things about your coverage. So
okay, that's great. So, I mean, we could be here talking for hours about gadgets, but I mean,
I'd love actually if y'all covered when I do the next What's in My Bag. I'd love to hear sort of your take on it, and I can translate it on Google or with ChatGPT. So
we'll do that.
Actually, if y'all want to translate it, you're welcome to. You can syndicate it.
Okay, we'll do that. What would you say is your greatest achievement? What are you most proud of? I know we've changed topics really fast, but from gadgets to your biggest achievement.
Oh. Things I'm proud of. I'm really proud of the WordPress community. So it's just a really great community, and I think in this modern age, as people have fewer places to connect or to make friends as an adult, or religion is at the lowest ever. Like, people still want something to believe in and to work on something that's bigger than themselves. And open source is amazing for that. And the WordPress community in particular is really friendly, really inclusive. I'd highly encourage folks, particularly, across Spain and Latin America and ever, like, there's awesome meetups. So go to a meetup, go to the WordCamps. You'll meet really great, passionate people. And it's very welcoming and inclusive. Automatic, that's the thing. Both WordPress and Automatic, I hope outlive me and go on for many decades into the future beyond me. And it's the thing that makes the things. So who knows, if we're talking 5 or 10 years from now, what will have changed. But to the extent that we've created a company of people who, with high integrity, who are curious and always learning, who are passionate and work hard, like, that will be the thing that matters and allow us to adapt, for all the changes that are coming in the future, which I think will happen even faster than the changes that we've talked about already. So those are things. And those, I think both have also set an example. So many other companies are now built in a distributed way or an open source way and another thing. So that, I would say, also is what I hope a legacy is. That beyond just the two things I mentioned, that there's hundreds or thousands of other companies and projects that have that same ethos. And each one of those then sets an example in their field or their community, and it just becomes, I hope, just the future of how everyone works or everyone builds things. Because I do believe, particularly open source as a philosophy, is really the best one I've been exposed to in my lifetime, and something that it feels like can be a basis of a free and open society for 100 or 200 years from now. Not unlike the ideas of like democracy or freedom of speech or kind of like new technology hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago in case of the Greeks and things, that turned out to like create a ton of prosperity and open societies and freedom and everything like that. I think open source in the same way makes us more free. It makes society more fair and equitable and more accessible.
What would you say is your biggest regret?
Gosh, regrets. Well, I've made a ton of mistakes. So there's definitely like so many mistakes that I've made over the years. When I started, I was like 19. So really, most of my 20s, tons of dumb stuff. But luckily, I had a lot of great people around me that, helped me navigate. And none of the mistakes were so big to be, existential for the product or the company or anything like that. Today, I mean, things I regret when I get spicy on Twitter, which happens occasionally. It's almost designed for making you say dumb things sometimes. I love it as well, but there's definitely times I've been spicy on there. Anytime I think I haven't really thought things through. But also, like, sometimes you need to make mistakes to learn from it. So those lessons of where I've messed up or had to apologize or delete something also like remind me better the next time. How to operate more in line with my ideals or my aspirations, or what I consider my code of ethics. I'm human, so I make mistakes and flaws just like anyone else. But I'm always trying to be on the curve of getting better over time.
We all do mistakes. I mean, it's our last block of questions. I promise. Tech and future. Okay. So, what future do you envision for open source? We've talked a lot about open source. So what's the future of open source?
Yeah, so open source has already I think I saw a stat that said 90% of software projects now use some piece of open source. It might be just a library or built on an operating system or something, but that is going to grow more and more and more. And I believe that, yeah, open approaches really win in the long term. It's hard for proprietary software to compete over decades. Over the short term, sure, you can make things and you can make more money, but to compete with a whole ecosystem is, I think, one, impossible over the very long term, 50 or 100 years. But two, the open source is also going to force the proprietary to get more open. Think how much more open iOS is because Android exists. And I think Apple by default really likes to lock things down, and you can't use other browsers or calendars or maps or remember how locked down it used to be? You couldn't even install apps on the first version. An open alternative forces them to open and be better. So I love that. I also really like the idea of, if you think of some of the ethos of open source, just affecting more and more of society. So one thing very core to open source is this idea of version control, or every piece of code, you can see who changed what and when. You can roll it back, you can fork it. Wikipedia, is that applied to an encyclopedia? You can go to the history tab of Wikipedia and see every single change throughout history, back to when an article was just a handful of words or a sentence, all the way to how it evolved to maybe be thousands and thousands of words. That history, I'd love to have for everything. I'd love to have that for laws. I'd love to have that for, when people write books or scripts or legal documents, or think of so many parts of everything we do. It'd be great to have that version history. It's actually built into WordPress. A lot of people don't know this, but every version of every post and page is saved by default. Some WordPress hosts turn it off, actually, which I think is terrible, but we have it on. The good ones all have it on. And that's really cool because it also makes it so, you can edit things and knowing it's easy to roll back or see who changed what. Why does the About page say that now? Oh, let's take a look. Which is great for personal use, also great for businesses. If you're a bank or something, that's actually you might be legally required to track all of those changes. So yeah, those are things that we learned from doing open source. I think distributed work really learned from doing open source. And I want to see that across society.
In the past decade, there was a significant rise of Facebook, Instagram as social networks, but in recent years, the social network factor has shifted towards private messaging environments.
Yeah.
Do social networks have an expiration date, in your opinion?
I think there's always places for different approaches to social connection. And, yes, messaging has grown a lot, but also TikTok's grown a ton and is now, I think, rivaling Meta in terms of its revenue. So obviously, the game is not done. There's room for something new. And even for people returning to things, as we're seeing with Tumblr. A lot of people are going back to something like Tumblr. I think of it a lot, I think of software a lot in terms of primitives, or kind of what are the basic building blocks. And so you can kind of mix and match these. So are things public by default or private by default? Is it permanent or ephemeral? You can mix these, private by default plus ephemeral, you have Snapchat. Public by default plus ephemeral, you have stories, on Instagram or, other platforms with it. Is it sort of following driven or algorithmically driven? On following, you have kind of Twitter and Instagram. On algorithmically driven, you have things like TikTok, where it kind of doesn't matter how many followers you have. Any piece of content can individually go viral. That's also something that happened in Tumblr quite a bit with reblog. So Tumblr actually invented this idea of reblogging and allowed any post, no matter how many followers you had, could get hundreds of thousands of notes, and that still happens today. Or things that might be years old go viral again, which is kind of like a mechanic that TikTok does for video to a really amazing, are you landscape or vertical? Landscape, kind of YouTube, vertical, TikTok or Instagram. So those are ways of mixing and matching. I think particularly driven by Telegram, actually. we're seeing all of this come to messaging. So Telegram now has stories, they have channels, they can be public or private, they have really great group messaging features. And so I feel like of all the platforms, Telegram has really driven the state of the art forward in a way that's pretty exciting. The way they do bots and apps and now crypto integration, like it's really quite neat. I use text for everything now, but Telegram I'll still use on its own, in addition to being inside text, just because the client for Telegram is so good, and I think they're kind of the best in business now for like animations, speed, so much. Yeah.
Do you believe decentralized social networks could be an alternative?
Decentralized. Yes, but they need to provide something that's not just decentralization. So decentralization, I love as a concept. It makes it more difficult to do things in a performant way, and speed is so important in application experience, and particularly social media experience. You know, people don't want to wait when they're scrolling or searching or other things. So, you know, we need to figure out how to make it just as fast as a centralized network, which is tricky. And they need to, you know, do moderation and anti-spam well, which is also tricky when you're decentralized, as we see with email and other decentralized technologies. Some of that moderation stuff becomes harder to do in a decentralized manner. None of these are impossible. I think these are solvable problems, but they need to do as well as centralized at that, and then provide something else. Maybe it's being ad-free, or maybe it's, you know, who knows what that something else is. But I don't think I've seen it yet. So right now, I think people largely use these for more philosophical reasons than necessarily a compelling user experience reason.
I'm sure you have an ideal vision of how you would like the internet to be in a few years. What would it be?
Well, to go to this decentralized social thing, I think one thing that we're trying to do with all our products, including WordPress and Tumblr, is Tumblr is centralized, but can we also make it use all the APIs that are decentralized? So obvious ones like RSS are there today, and open input and output export APIs, but also things like ActivityPub or Nostr or Blue Sky or other things in the future, I think would be really great to integrate with. And I think platforms should support as many of these as possible, right? Because then that, again, if you're a writer, a user of Tumblr, you want as much distribution as possible. Like, you don't want to like just have one. What was the full question again?
The full question, what would it be your ideal internet in a few years? How internet would be in your, not how it's going to be, that's my next question actually, but what would you like it to be?
I am really, really excited to see platforms opening up more and adopting more standards. So USB-C.
Yes, please.
And also USB-C getting good, right? Because there's so much weirdness around the cables and all of that. You kind of never know what you're getting. Is it 2.0, 3.0? How much power can it support? How much data transfer speeds, et cetera? I actually love that some new things are starting to label the cables. I think that should be more of a standard. And then online, just the platforms opening up. Right now, I think while I love smartphones, the closed ecosystem of those, the tax they charge to apps, the innovation they limit with their app store rules and forcing people to use their payments. We've been blocked many times, shipping sometimes innocuous features. So I think although they've enabled a ton, like a Cambrian explosion of apps and things built on top of them, there's so much more that's possible. And so perhaps that's regulation coming from the European Union. I hope that'll start to be driven in America as well, around like opening up payments, opening up app stores. I think that we can do this, and the web shows that you can do this in a very open way and actually still be quite secure. You can still build in security and all those other things while allowing a much more open approach. And then finally, the web, the capabilities are getting so much better. So one thing that we're working on in WordPress now that's coming in the next year is real-time co-editing. So think of that like a Google Docs type feature where you can see, each person's cursor. So you and I could be working on the same post at the same time, or editing something, or maybe designing a page together. Maybe like, you're the designer and I'm the client. And so you can kind of show me things in real time. That's going to be really, really cool. That used to require something fairly sophisticated on the server to maintain open sockets and sort of implement that. Now we can do it entirely peer-to-peer using technology that's in the browser. That's so cool. The other thing that's really amazing that happens in the browser now is, historically to run WordPress, you needed a server. PHP, MySQL, so you had to run it yourself or pay someone to host it, including us. We have this new thing called Playground. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So using this technology called WASM, Web Application something, sorry, I forgot, but allows us to actually boot up WordPress entirely in your browser. So, in about 10 seconds, it creates an entire WordPress running PHP and everything that's ephemeral. So you can run it just yourself. And so we're doing things like experimenting now on the plugin directory. You can click preview, and it actually loads a temporary WordPress with the plugin installed, and you can test it out and try it out and everything. I think this is going to be really cool for teaching people to code or teaching them how to develop plugins or other things. It's just so cool that it boots up immediately. And this technology over time, and it allows us to use a different database backend, which is, so historically we've only been MySQL or MariaDB, and now we can actually use SQLite, allows you to embed it. So there's this new application that one of our contributors, Ella, wrote, that it's a notes application, but it uses the Gutenberg editor, which is really, really powerful, but it runs natively on iOS and Android, running WordPress.
Oh my God.
So when you launch the app, it actually boots WordPress. It's a WordPress. Yeah. And so when you can do that, then what does that allow in terms of synchronizing it or encrypting it? So it actually is able to store everything in iCloud. So it's fully encrypted. So you get this fully encrypted notes app that she was able to write in a matter of weeks that, when we've done Simple Note or J1 in the past, took many months and years of effort. So it really makes it way easier. So I'm very, very excited about technology like that.
I know, I can see that, I can see that. So my last question, I always ask this one, okay? If we were here 5 years from now, what would we be talking about in terms of WordPress, yourself, automatic, 5 years from now?
I think we'll be talking about Playground, which I just mentioned a lot, because it also opens up some really interesting architectural things, like running WordPress at the edge. In kind of a serverless type way, which hasn't really been possible before. So I think that for performance and scalability and everything could be really amazing. It might bring the scalability down by an order of magnitude. I think we'll be talking about AI a lot. So already with generative AI, it's so cool. What I love about it is you can have it make 20 things. And then you or I, the human, can choose which one. But also I think we're relatively close to where if you want to redesign your site, you might just be able to say to the AI, hey, make it more grunge, or make it blue, or make it feel more fun. And it can do that. Or maybe it could even make 6 different options for you. So before where, clients and developers might kind of work together to make one thing. I think in the future, the developer or agency might present the client with like 10 fully built sites, 10 themes, and then they can choose one and then tweak it almost in real time. You'll be able to talk to your WordPress, maybe even using your voice, and say, install this plugin, do this thing, upgrade. All of that I think will become just a lot more accessible. Again, this idea of a democratization of intelligence and ability being something that before you'd have to have a lot of training or knowledge. You'll now just be able to ask it to do things. And I think the twin secular trends of AI and open source are the most important of our generation because they're very complementary. Because when you ask the AI to modify software or build a website or something, it's going to use open source to do that. So I think that could open up. WordPress is a power user tool in a lot of ways. And it has a lot of buttons and things you can do. So it can make that power accessible to a much wider audience.
Oh, that was really nice. So Matt, thank you a lot for coming, for accepting the Xataka Leyenda award. And that was a really interesting and fun interview. and see you tonight in
Thank
the
you so
gala.
much. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
You. It's a pleasure for us. Thank you, man. Thank you.